Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone. Welcome to the AllPaths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We're your hosts, Emily and Lauren from the nonprofit organization AllPaths Family Building, and today we're talking with Katie about her journey. Katie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Yes, happy to have you.
Before we jump into your story, we'd love for you just to quickly introduce yourself for our listeners.
Sure. So I'm Katie Gilliam. I am predominantly a stay-at-home mom in Salem, Massachusetts. And I describe myself as a story lover. I love to hear other people's stories and share my own stories as well. I have a wonderful family that includes one living child and one non-living child. And I'm excited to share my journey to parenting and all that comes along with it.
Great. We're so happy to dig in. Can you tell us a bit about your journey to starting a family? Where did it all begin?
Yeah. So I think that as I reflect back, my journey to starting a family really began before I even met my partner. When I was 29, I was diagnosed with PCOS at the time. I know there's new name around that now, which is wonderful. But when I met with a specialist, I was kind of abruptly told, if you want to have a family, don't wait for the house and the dog. And if you meet somebody, you probably need to just hurry up and get going because it's going to be hard for you.
No pressure, right?
Yeah, no pressure.
Fine.
Yeah, at 29, when there's also all of the pressure in the world to be like, oh, I'm not, I haven't met anybody yet.
Right.
Spoiler alert, I did wait for the house and the dog. And it was a great choice. I met my now husband shortly after that doctor's appointment, and we got married during COVID, wild and crazy time. So we bought our condo in 2020, got married in our backyard with all our friends on Zoom. And that's kind of when we began our family building journey. We kind of decided, like pretty much right after we got married, that we were ready to start trying. We'd been together for a while and knew we were already kind of starting as somewhat older parents. And so we just wanted to get ahead of things. And we tried to conceive for about 2 years before we really said, okay, like this really isn't working. We're probably going to need to seek some additional help, and started our fertility process. Given my diagnosis, I kind of assumed that everything was going to land back on me. Turns out it basically did. So the first doctor that we worked with was not my favorite. And I was told that my husband could get a report card to put on the fridge that was straight A pluses because there was nothing wrong with him. And in fact, everything was exceptional. And
Yeah.
I was the problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So that, was really tough. And from that point, we had seen this doctor, a friend had recommended them to me. And so I was really taken aback by their approach. And in addition to the not so gentle wording of things, they also told me that I would need to consent to weight loss surgery in order to proceed with IVF.
My goodness.
Whoa.
So it turned out to be a moot point because we had a successful IUI pregnancy. And I, in that first kind of cycle, and we're extremely excited and felt really fortunate because we thought, oh, we're going to, this is going to be this much longer journey, much more intense. And so, yeah, we graduated from the fertility clinic. This is back in 2022. We were like feeling really great. And my pregnancy was pretty normal. I had like awful morning sickness and I only wanted to eat chicken nuggets and peanut butter and jelly and frozen lemonade. But it was pretty normal. And then that quickly changed. So when I was going in for my anatomy scan at about 19 weeks, again, I had been told by a team of doctors who at that point I had selected for their weight neutral approach. When you go in for the anatomy scan, like, don't be surprised if the scan takes a little bit longer, if they don't get all of the pictures that they need. You might have to go back a few times, and some of that has to do with body size and how ultrasound works, but it's not your body, it's the technology that's the problem.
That's a better approach.
Much better approach.
Yes. Yes.
And this was coming from my OB, who I had, vetted and had been seeing for years for my regular GYN appointments. So I felt really confident that she was giving me the best information, but also with that gentle, body neutral approach. And so I was really prepared to go in for this ultrasound, and, we were all excited. We had seen a few pictures of her at this point. We knew that it was a girl, and we were just like, over the moon excited to see more on the ultrasound. And we went into the appointment. So this was important-ish fact, is it was December 19th. So, right in the midst of holiday chaos. And we went into the appointment. They did the scan, and kind of like halfway through, the ultrasound tech got really quiet. And I was like, oh, do you need me to move? Is there something that you can't see? Like, I can change positions. And I was trying to be super helpful and accommodating. And she's just like, no, I think hang tight for a second. I'm just going to go grab the doctor.
Not what anybody wants to hear.
Not what anybody wants to hear.
Did you know right away when she said that something was up, or were you still not sure?
I think at the time I kind of knew like something was going on, but I kind of just assumed that like maybe she couldn't see something, and it was more of an issue with that, and she just wanted like a second set of eyes.
Sure.
But I didn't know how serious it was until the doctor came in the room. And the doctor came in and she said, oh, it looks like the baby has a cleft lip and palate. And I said, oh, okay, like super common. Boston Children's Hospital is the best. They like fix these all the time. My cousin was born with a cleft lip and palate, and she's an adult and she's totally fine, like no big deal.
Right.
And then she continued and said, oh, and we also can't see the midline of the brain. And I said, And so then I started asking questions like, can you not see it, or is it not there?
Right.
And at that point, you could kind of see on the doctor's face the seriousness of the situation. And she said, we need to send you to Boston Children's for more tests. You'll need to have a fetal MRI and a further ultrasound and things. And we're not sure, but it looks like there's some facial abnormalities and some brain development that is abnormal. And I looked the doctor in the eye and I said, I need you to tell me right now, do I need to consider terminating this pregnancy? And she said, you may be in a position where you're considering terminating this pregnancy. And I remember like leaving the ultrasound and, sobbing. I'm already like a mess. Yeah. I'm sobbing. I'm totally inconsolable. My husband, I think, was like emotional and probably crying, but I don't think it had really sunk in with him yet. And he was like, oh, they just said we need more tests. Like, we're going to get more tests.
Right.
I'm like on the phone with my mom, who is now a retired nurse, but I'm on the phone with my mom and I'm like reading the paperwork. Mom, what does this mean? Mom, what does this mean? And trying not to Dr. Google, all of the different terms. But I am somebody who already has pretty intense anxiety. And I often find that the best way for me to manage that is to think in worst case scenarios and then make a plan, right?
Mhm.
Like
I feel that in
want
my soul.
Relate. Hard relate.
yeah. And I want to plan for, you know, A through Z,
Anything.
right?
Yes.
And so I got home and I started looking all these things up, and I said, okay, like this is, you know, what we got to plan for. And I looked at my husband and I said, we have to name her right now,
Oh,
because up until this point, we had tossed around a few names, but we hadn't named her officially. And I felt like if there was going to be any hope of carrying the pregnancy to term, I needed there to be a name. I needed there to be personhood. And I also felt strongly about that if we were going to terminate the pregnancy, because I needed her to exist, to be real.
yes. Yeah.
And so we agreed that, you know, she would be named Elvera Claire, after my grandmother's, kind of an homage to. So Elvira is one of my grandmother's names. And then my other grandmother was named Gertrude, and those names don't go together. So the Claire comes from my second grandmother would often ask me to play Claire de Lune on the piano when I saw her.
Wow.
And so
That's beautiful.
That's really beautiful.
so that's where her name comes from. So Ellie Claire, which, you know, in hindsight, I go like, we named our daughter Eclair, like the pastry. But you know, you don't think about these things, right? You don't think about these things when you're in the moment.
I mean, an excellent pastry, you know,
an excellent pastry, so delicious. Yeah, so we named her, and I just kept thinking, okay, I have to just talk to this baby until we have all the other testing done. So I spent a lot of time talking to her, and then 2 days before Christmas, we had all of the testing done at Children's, and the team at Boston Children's Hospital is beyond phenomenal. I cannot say enough wonderful things about the neonatal neurologist that we saw, the social worker, the genetic counselors that we saw, the lovely people who talked me through an MRI. I mean, if you haven't had an MRI, it can be scary enough to be in a weird tube with beeping or whatever. If you are 20 weeks pregnant and you have to have an MRI where you are laying on your side the entire time because you can't be on your back because you're pregnant.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
and
that's tough.
They have to take pictures of the fetus, so you have this extra camera thing happening in the middle, and you're in a tube, and you're also in a larger body. Like, it was extremely complicated, but we made it through. And I couldn't wear headphones because I was on my side, so I couldn't.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
So I was just in there just hanging out.
With all your thoughts. Yeah.
With all my thoughts. And I literally sang the entirety of like the first act of Rent in my head. Like, it's like
I love it.
Just trying to come up with like things, right?
You gotta entertain yourself somehow.
Occupy my brain and stay still. And like, what is the brain doing? You know? Yeah. And thankfully, again, thank goodness for the providers. Someone said, we're not going to show you any of the images from the MRI, and like, don't look up what an MRI of a fetal MRI looks like, because they look like aliens, because there's no, just because of how the imaging comes across. And they were like, it'll look way scary to you. Like, just don't look at it. But we met with the team later that day virtually. So we were at the hospital all morning, then we came home, and then they were like, yeah, we'll call you for this virtual appointment. And I knew then, when they added the genetic counselor and social worker to our appointment call, that it couldn't possibly be good news. And yes, they told us that essentially Ellie had what's called holoprosencephaly, which is when the frontal lobe of the brain does not develop in two hemispheres. So there is no midline to the brain. And in practicality, what that means, in addition to, facial abnormalities, potential seizures, it meant that her lifespan was going to be between 3 and 6 months. And that entire time she would be in the hospital, most likely on a feeding tube and multiple other assistance machines. And the team at Children's was incredible in that they said, we will support you in whatever decision you make about your pregnancy, and we will guide you through. And if you want, to take this pregnancy to term and meet your baby, then we will do everything we can to extend their life for as long as we can. And if you decide to terminate the pregnancy, we can talk about choices around that. And we kind of already had talked, my husband and I had already kind of talked about it. And that was really a pivotal moment for me, because now in post-reflection, I think back to that decision, ironically, being the first decision I ever made as a mother, because I had this beautiful opportunity to ensure that my child never felt pain. And so the way that I describe it to people often is that if, as any parent, if you have the opportunity to make sure that your kid never ever felt a scrape or a boo-boo or any emotional pain, like, wouldn't you take that away? Wouldn't you want to ensure that they never had to go through that? And the doctors had assured me that while she was still in utero, she wasn't feeling any pain. But that once she was born, no matter the circumstances, that she would be in pretty consistent pain. And that pain management, in addition to the feeding tube and all of the other things, would be a major part of her experience. And I just couldn't see that being a way to live. And it felt like an incredibly selfish decision to try to bring that baby into the world just so that I could see her face and hold her and let her exist here for a short period of time, knowing that whole time she was going to be suffering. So I think, ultimately I think that was the first of many decisions that I made as a mother to try to think selflessly about what would be best for my child. And I have been very clear with many, many people, including my conservative Catholic family, that the decision I made was to have a late-term abortion. And that is a decision that not only saved my child from pain, but also allowed me to continue my family building journey and to get to the point where I have the child that I have now who's living. And that process is not something that I took lightly. It's not something that my husband took lightly. And it's not something that anyone who's in that position takes lightly. So the importance of having access to that kind of care is beyond words for me. I think about what would have happened if I lived in another state, what would have happened if I lived in another country or it was a different time, because the absolute agony of losing a child at 23 weeks pregnant would have been, exponentially enlarged if I had to carry that, baby to term. And by making the choice that we did, going through the process, having the termination, we were also able to spend those last couple of weeks, really trying to bond as much as we could with that baby. We did a lot of talking to her. My husband played his favorite Christmas carols. Um, you know, I had just started being able to feel her kick, celebrating Christmas as a family. Um, and having her be present in some way was really special. But it doesn't make the losing her any less traumatic. And there certainly are moments where I question my decision, our decision, even now. I feel incredibly firm in that decision. But there are so many moments where I think, oh, like, should I have induced labor instead of having, a D&E where if I had induced labor, I would have been able to see her face.
Wow.
Should I have continued on with the pregnancy and met her, because 3 months, 6 months is better than no months. I mean, those doubts, I think they come creeping in, and they will forever, because the thing that no one talks about when you talk about losing someone you love is that when you lose a pregnancy, when you lose a baby that hasn't been born yet, you're grieving for a future that you don't know anything about. You're not just grieving for what you already know, but you're grieving for the endless possibilities of what could be. And you
Yeah.
don't have any memories to look back upon to get you through those moments.
Right. People say, remember the good times, but you don't have those memories.
Yeah. So I think,
Yes.
going through that whole process, I started inspiring me to think about how I could share my story with other people, even at that point in my family building journey, because not enough people were talking about it. We had been pretty open about our fertility journey at that point, and I said, I think it's really important that I talk about this. And I was so fortunate after all of that. We had to make some really tough decisions about, would you like to have a funeral, and how would you like to celebrate or not, this child. And we also had to make decisions like, do we want to do genetic testing to see if could there be something that happened here that was a genetic component? And I will say that again, I think I just feel very lucky that we had such a wonderful team to guide us through this process. But also my husband and I can be pretty pragmatic people. And so we sort of just sat down and said, okay, like, what makes the most sense? Like, let's take emotion and put that aside for right now. And let's try to use the logic side of our brain and what makes sense. And so ultimately we had genetic testing done, and donated the rest of remains to scientific research, because we felt pretty strongly about the possibility of her cells being used in some kind of medical research that would hopefully help someone else in the future. And again, where we live, we're so fortunate that there's incredible people doing, work in their fields that will hopefully advance medicine. So that felt really important to us. And then, surprise, surprise, we found a genetic component. So we were told that 60% of the time there is no known cause. And the other 40% of the time, the cause is really difficult to pin down. And they found essentially a genetic abnormality, I guess, in my side of the family that led to the holoprosencephaly. And the genetic counselor at Children's was able to help me draft a letter to all of my first cousins on that side of the family to explain to them what the genetic component was and allow them to make choices about their own family building journeys, where they could then go and get tested for that gene mutation, and then use that information however they wanted to use it. But I didn't want to gatekeep.
Right. And how was that received by your family?
Super well.
Good.
So I can now say that multiple people in my family have used that information to guide their family building journeys. And that it has been very meaningful for
That's
people
great.
to have that info. And I think that it also is meaningful for some other folks in our family and in an older generation, looking at their genetic code and kind of thinking about, oh, if I'm a carrier of this gene, I've experienced some other things in my life. Are these things connected? And meeting with genetic counselors to kind of talk about, what that means as well. I think it was really validating for some folks beyond the family building.
Right.
Yeah. And, so then I get to talk about the happy part of my journey. We decided to switch to Brigham fertility after our first experience. And we went through IVF at Brigham with Dr. Kimberly Keefe Smith, who is a freaking superhero. She is the best. And I hope she hears this because I just can't say enough awesome things about her and her whole team. But we are so thankful to the scientists who figured out a way to test the single cell of an embryo to determine whether or not this gene mutation exists. So I'm sure that there are lots of people who will hear this who know all about the wild ride that is IVF. We did an egg retrieval, and even that whole process was kind of comical because it just kept getting pushed off because things just kept happening in life. Like there was a pipe that burst at Brigham. I fell through my parents' deck and I hurt my leg.
Oh no.
So I had a crush injury, so we couldn't do it while I had a crush injury. Then I got COVID. Like it just kept, it just kept coming.
Comedy of
right?
errors.
The hit kept coming. And so by the time we got to the egg retrieval, I was like, oh, we can conquer the world.
We have conquered the world.
We've done all of these really hard things. And and so from that moment, right, doing the egg retrieval, having the embryos that made it to day 5 get tested, from 9 embryos that made it to day 5, we ended up with 3 embryos that had no genetic abnormalities of their own, no chromosome abnormalities, and then no mutation from this very specific thing that had happened with Ellie. And so from there, we were able to, kind of decide what to do next.
Wow. How soon after losing Ellie did you do the egg retrieval or transfer to Brigham?
So we would have kind of jumped right back on the horse, so to speak. We would have done the retrieval much sooner. So we lost Ellie in January of 2023. And it took a little bit of time because of the genetic testing component to have all of that come back and then transfer records and then get started at Brigham in terms of doing the other testing that happens before being able to do the retrieval. So we didn't do a retrieval until the following late February. So February of 24. Yeah. Like years.
Right. Where are we?
So my daughter's birthday is in March of 25. So that part we know. So she's so once again, incredibly lucky. we went through the process of having the egg retrieval. We had those embryos tested. We knew we needed to do it. So you had to do a frozen transfer, because in order to get them tested, you have to have them frozen. And that first transfer was successful.
Wow.
So, in the grand scheme of IVF, like, I feel like I didn't have a tough road. I had my first IUI went through, my first IVF cycle went through. But of course there was,
The
You had
toughest
other
road.
bumps.
yeah,
Yeah.
other bumps and challenging things. So
Yeah. So anybody who's been through loss knows that even thinking about getting pregnant again, never mind being pregnant after loss, is a lot to deal with emotionally. How did you get through that? Where did you find support during that whole process from deciding to try again through a successful pregnancy?
Yeah, so that's actually how I found AllPaths. So I had a friend of a friend who had had several miscarriages and a lot of complications with her own journey. And after we lost Ellie, I had, shared with those that were close with us, and then basically said, like, if you know anyone who has a similar story, who wants to talk to me, please connect them, because I'm happy to share my story and I'm happy to listen to others. And so this person reached out and she said, hey, I don't know if you've heard of this organization, but they have some really great support resources. You should check them out. And so we went to a virtual peer-led support group, which was really fantastic and super helpful, because it was the first time that we got to share about our story and hear other people's story of loss. And, that was kind of that first step in getting through. And then my husband and I both sought out therapists as well. That was like a really important part of the process to, really just be able to take care of our mental health, and to talk to each other about it, but to talk to someone outside of our relationship.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that was key.
Yeah. I think a lot of people discount how hard it is. When you're in a relationship, you're always counting on that other person to be your support. That's what they've been this entire time. But now all of a sudden you're in a situation where both of you need support and you can't necessarily lift each other up the same way you're used to. And I think the people who have a hard time recognizing that can really struggle.
Yeah. And I have to say, the social work team that was with us during the termination process gave us this like really awesome packet of information that was just like for partners, for parents, for grandparents.
Oh, that's nice.
Like it had like a one page for every single kind of like type of person or relationship, to talk about like what you may personally be going through, but also like how to kind of support each other through that.
That's great.
And that felt really helpful. I felt like after reading that, kind of understanding that like my husband and I process info very differently, process stress very differently, even outside of the situation. That was helpful to understand that like our relationship wasn't crumbling around us either, right? We were both going through something really hard, and we also like were the only people who really understood what we were going through. And I think that the choice of when to kind of start the journey again, is that moment is so different for every person.
Right.
For us, I think we felt like because we had that quantifiable scientific information, it felt like an emotionally safer journey. Something that my husband Chris and I talk about all the time is that knowing something logically and how you feel about it emotionally, vastly different things, right? So I knew that things were different in that pregnancy, but it did not always feel different, right? And in fact, when things were like stagnant. Like when I was pregnant and I was like no longer had morning sickness, I was like,
Yes, the panic.
That's terrifying.
right? You're going
Yep.
like, is everything okay? Oh my God.
I need feedback. Yes.
Yes, I need
Yep.
feedback. Exactly. I need
Uh-huh.
feedback. And everything about this pregnancy was also very different. I had an anterior placenta this time, which
Wow.
meant that because the placenta was in front of the baby, it meant that I was probably not going to be able to feel movement for longer than I had the
Right.
first time. So
That's not helpful.
not
No.
helpful, right? This pregnancy, she was like all over the place and like was breech at one point and transverse at one point. And so like it just felt very different. Like it was just
Yeah.
extremely different. And so the whole time that I was pregnant and every time I had those like feelings of anxiety and like, how is this going to work out? I had already really started to build that village of people and that support team for myself that I knew I would need. And so I had therapist, I had already contracted a doula, and I had friends, and my husband and I were in couples doing couples therapy as well, to just kind of shore everything up, right? Like there was something wrong in our relationship, but the way that I tell people is it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with your car, but you still get an oil change.
Exactly.
It's just
Exactly. This is maintenance.
doing the maintenance, right? Making sure that we were really strong, that we knew how to communicate with one another, that we weren't holding anything back. So all of that support work really led to, I guess, what you would call success in a second pregnancy, in that like I felt good. I felt supported and I felt good. And there was also plenty of times where I said, I'm so done being pregnant. Please remove this baby. I'm done. You can, it's like, we're done, yeah, I reached like 30 weeks and I was like, I'm all set. We can
Can we
take
be
it
done
from
with
today,
this?
right? Yeah.
And I imagine that anatomy scan for her must have been very scary to walk into. How did you
Yeah.
prepare for that?
I mean, I think it was scary, but I think also when you've been in a situation where you kind of are in the worst case scenario, there was a lot of things about the anatomy scan that were like no longer scary. Like I said,
Sure.
what are they going to tell us today that we are not prepared for? Because in some
Right.
ways you go into it and you think like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's terrible. Like this thing is going to happen again.
Mm.
But you've already experienced it once. So in some ways I was like, okay, yeah, we did that once and we got through it. And we know that we got through it.
Yeah.
And there was also moments where I was like, what are they going to tell us? Like, if she only has one arm, that's okay.
Right.
Like,
Right.
like these are the things, right? Like
Mhm.
everything becomes relative.
Right.
If they said, I don't know, like we think she might have brittle bone, just like whatever, like I would have said, okay, like great, let's assemble a team and figure it out.
Right.
Like there was all of these things that we just felt like we had already dealt with something that felt like the bottom of the barrel, like the worst case scenario. And so in some ways we felt like there's nothing they could tell us that will feel worse than that,
Right.
especially because we were so blindsided the first time.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I mean, like, was there still hesitation when I went to the anatomy scan? Sure. But I also think because we had that first pregnancy and we were working with a different team on this pregnancy, we were seeing an MFM doctor. So somebody who was highly specialized from the beginning of the pregnancy. We had much more monitoring done ahead of time. So we felt like if there was an issue, we would have seen that earlier on. And so I think that was also a comfort. But of course, a parent of living children can tell you that like the worries never stop. It's not like you get to the point where like you have a baby, they're like alive and breathing in the hospital and they're doing great. Everyone says, look at your perfect baby. And then you get to stop worrying. Like that doesn't
Like,
exist.
oh, now I have to protect this perfect baby.
Right. And so I think that was also part of it for me, was just like hearing from lots of other people saying like, I hear you and I hear that you're anxious, and that is so valid. But you've got to find a way to work through that anxiety, because if you are going to be a parent, this is sticking around. This feeling is just going to exist. And so you have to work through how you allow that feeling to take over or not take over your life.
Yeah. It's incredibly wise and incredibly true.
And incredibly hard to do.
Totally. But that was also, I think I see that come across in my parenting a lot now. So our daughter, Francesca, is 15, almost 15 months old. And she is truly a wild one. She was wild on the inside and she's wild on the outside. She wakes up and the first thing she says in the morning is go, go, go. And she means it.
Let's do it.
It is like, let's go. Right. And so our collective kind of motto in parenting is it safe? Like, great. Is it safe? Awesome. And so that the converse of that is it dangerous or is it inconvenient? Right. So that's really the crux of it. Is it dangerous or is it inconvenient? I cannot take credit for that. I saw that probably on an Instagram mom feed somewhere. But that is really like the crux of my parenting style, because there are so many moments where I'm like, here's my kid, like alive and doing well and being a toddler. So who am I to stop her from taking her toes and putting them in a peanut butter sandwich? If that's what she wants to do, live your life.
Right.
Because I feel so fortunate that she has the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not dangerous. So I don't need to say no.
It's messy. We can clean a child, right?
Yeah. Children are washable.
They're little scientists. They're just trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Exactly.
What happens if I do this?
Right.
Yeah. So I have to ask, does Francesca's name have a story behind it as well?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for asking. So my grandmother, Elvera, that I talked about, her husband's name was Pasquale Francesco. So Francesco is a family name. So Francesca is the other side of that. So those grandparents were very important in my life. And it's really nice that she gets to have an Italian-ish first name, because we do not have an Italian last name anymore. So it felt like kind of an identity piece for myself too. Just growing up with some of those Italian American traditions and how important that was for us. But we also liked that Francesca has a lot of options for her to be her own person in her name choice as she gets older. And, lots of different options for nicknames and things like that.
Yeah.
And most importantly, my husband, who works in IT, said her initials don't spell out anything weird. So when it comes to having an email address,
that's important.
Yeah. It's like, you have to think about naming conventions for emails because that's a thing that happens apparently. So her name doesn't spell out anything weird. And we thought, it's relatively easy to pronounce. Turns out not so easy for the under 4 age group.
Sure.
To pronounce Francesca.
Yeah. It's going to be a little hard to learn how to spell too.
Yes. But they do, the kids at the playground already kind of have nicknames for her. There's lots of cool nicknames that, she has access to. And if she chooses to go that route, and we're just excited for her to, I think, be rooted in that family sort of history, but also have the ability to make it her own and really be her own person in the future. So.
I love that. That's
beautiful.
So as we start to wrap up, we could talk to you for forever, but thank you so much for sharing all of your story. It's beautiful and heartbreaking.
What a journey.
Hearing you talk about how that was the first decision you made as a mother, that That is. And I think that's a piece that a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
in the current political climate don't necessarily understand when you are faced with those decisions, that you need to make them as a parent,
Yes.
as someone who is putting your child's
Right.
needs
Yes.
first.
Yes. This is
Yeah.
a compassionate choice for your child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yep.
this is a traumatic event and decision to have to make, a traumatic experience, as you mentioned. And to not have choice or agency or support around that is adding more trauma that's completely unfair and adding more devastation to an already horrifically devastating experience.
Yeah. And I will
Yeah.
also add that part of our choice was made based around the financial implications that we have to navigate in this country as well. Again, this is a hill I will die on, but we are in a relatively good financial position. We have a lot of privilege and a lot of family support as well, financially and otherwise. And we still had to think about the fact that if we did go full term with a pregnancy that was going to be complex and had a child who had complex medical needs,
Mm-hmm.
that was likely going to be the end of our family building journey, because the financial implication of having a child in the hospital for however many months was going to be something that probably would put us in a financial situation, at least for our childbearing years, that would really impact whether or not we had choice to go and create another life.
Yeah.
And so I think, that is another piece that, of course, this community, the demographic of people that I imagine generally listens, know all too well. IVF is expensive. Family building is expensive. Raising children is expensive. But the state of medical care in this country is expensive enough that it routinely bankrupts people. And yeah.
And that's the frustrating part. Like, does IVF cost a lot of money? Yes, but so do so many other medical procedures. And we're not sitting here being like, oh, well, a knee replacement is really expensive, or a cardiac procedure is really expensive. So, that's optional. We're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so much. I'm going to not rant, but
yeah, we could talk forever and ever.
Again, thank you for sharing your story, for sharing Ellie's story, so that people recognize all of the different layers that go into a decision like this, that go into being in this situation.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So as we do wrap up, what is one thing that you would say to somebody who is just starting to grow their family? Do you have any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would say that remembering that there are a lot of ways to build a family is the thing that got me through. As we talked earlier in the podcast, we all have a plan A, B, C. And sometimes you have to get to plan Z for what family looks like. But families, take all different shapes and sizes. And I think that is an important thing to remember, that whatever your family does look like is so valid and is so beautiful.
Couldn't agree more. So well said. And one more question for you, Katie. How can someone show up for a friend or family member who is struggling to build their family?
Yeah, this one is such a tricky question, right? Because we all process information so differently. I think that my number one piece of advice would be to remember, in a world where social media and texting and sort of like instant communication exists, that if you have a friend who's struggling to build their family and they need a break from the world and they don't reach out to you for a few months, or they're just kind of a little bit more absent, that it is not something that you should take personally, and to continue to try to reach out to that friend, kind of without pressure, right? Saying, hey, I'm here. I saw this meme and I thought of you. Or continue to invite that person to events and to parties and know that they might say no. And that's okay, but still kind of maintaining the friendship and allowing them the grace to take the space that they might need during their struggle.
I love that.
Right. Can we have grace and compassion for people having a hard time, not hold them to the highest standards of friendship when they need you to give a little bit more than they can.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't asked about that you wanted to touch on?
Man, I mean, as other people have maybe have seen, I've done some story shares at the Lemon Grove where I now work. So I will briefly plug the Lemon Grove. We're a doula agency and perinatal wellness collaborative. And I joined the team at the Lemon Grove because Marissa Hathaway was my fabulous birth doula when I had Francesca, and having that support really changed my life. And so I'm so excited to continue to work with them and help others. But I have done some story shares and have reflected on my parenting journey, my birth story from so many different angles. So the story that I told today about Ellie is about like 1/10 of my story as a parent and my story as a mother. Mm-hmm. And I think I just want more and more people to think back and reflect on their own journey. Because when I started to put pen to paper and think about my story, whether it was through the lens of loss or through the lens of defining motherhood, or kind of all these bits and pieces, it was really powerful and impactful for me to reflect upon my own history and to really write my own story and then share it with others. So I hope more people get the opportunity to do that for themselves, even if they never share it with anyone else, because it's a wonderful practice.
I love that.
Yes.
The stories we share with each other, the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell our children about how they came to be in the world are so important. And yeah, big shout out to Marissa at Lemon Grove. She's amazing, doing wonderful work. I think she was our guest in episode 23.
Yeah, I'm like, I know
early 20s. So if anybody,
but I don't know.
If anybody hasn't heard that yet, they should go back and give it a listen. Talks more about the amazing work that they're doing, well, that you all are doing now that you're part of the team.
Thank you, Katie.
But thank you, Katie, so much again for sharing your story, for elevating a topic that's not often covered, whether it's in podcasts or social media or wherever. But it definitely needs to be discussed. It needs to be something that people understand they're not alone if they find themselves in the situation that you were in.
Absolutely. And I hope that more folks take advantage of the support groups that are out there, whether through AllPaths or otherwise, because sharing our stories really does make a difference.
It does. Thank you so much, Katie.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week with more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at AllPathsFB, or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, to learn more about our work. And please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. AllPaths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support. And today we want to recognize and thank Gold sponsor, Mass General Brigham. Your partnership is vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone who is struggling to grow their family. And to the entire AllPaths community, thank you for being here. It's an honor to walk with you on your journey.